The upscale restaurant, Harmony Bistro, was known for its classy ambience and impeccable service. Nestled in the heart of the city, its modern decor and dim lighting gave it a warm, inviting feel. Patrons filled the air with cheerful conversations and the clinking of cutlery against plates, creating a lively yet sophisticated atmosphere. Amid this hum of activity, Marcus Turner, a 28-year-old waiter, weaved between tables with practiced ease. Dressed in a crisp white shirt, black slacks, and a neatly tied apron, Marcus exuded professionalism. His tall frame and kind brown eyes reflected a quiet confidence, though those who knew him well understood the layers beneath his polished demeanor. Marcus wasn't just a waiter. He was someone who prided himself on bringing a smile to his customers. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood, he had faced his share of challenges, particularly as a young black man. Yet, he carried himself with grace, using his work as a platform to prove that kindness and resilience could overcome prejudice. His dream was to someday open his own restaurant, where people of all backgrounds would feel welcome. His daily routine was demanding but fulfilling. Marcus arrived early each morning, ensuring the dining area was spotless before service began. He memorized the specials for the day, greeted regular patrons by name, and always kept a mental note of his customers' preferences. To him, every interaction was an opportunity to spread positivity. But beneath his calm exterior, Marcus carried the weight of subtle prejudices he encountered, moments that reminded him of how the world could be both beautiful and harsh. Today was no different. As the dinner rush peaked, Marcus moved with precision, his voice warm as he greeted guests and ensured their needs were met. Near the entrance, Lillian Hayes, a woman in her mid-40s, strode into the restaurant. Clad in an expensive dress and carrying a designer handbag, her every move spoke of privilege and entitlement. Lillian was a regular at Harmony Bistro, though not necessarily a favorite among the staff. Her sharp tongue and dismissive attitude often left employees bristling. Tonight, she appeared particularly irritable, tapping her manicured nails on the hostess stand as she demanded a table near the window. "Ma'am, I'll take you to your seat," Marcus said, his tone polite as always. Lillian gave him a once-over, her eyes lingering a second too long, as if assessing him. "Fine, but I don't want to be sitting next to anyone loud," she said curtly. Marcus led her to a prime table by the window, keeping his composure despite her tone. "Here you go, ma'am. Your server will be with you shortly," he said with a smile. As Marcus turned to leave, Lillian muttered under her breath, just loud enough for him to hear, "Well, at least someone knows their place." He paused for the briefest moment, his grip tightening on the tray he held, but he continued walking. Marcus was no stranger to such remarks. He had learned to let them roll off his back, though each one left a small scar. From a corner of the restaurant, the owner, James Wallace, watched the scene unfold. A man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair, James was not only the heart of the bistro, but also a firm believer in treating everyone with respect. Over the years, he had seen the best and worst in people, and tonight, he felt a familiar tension brewing. Little did anyone know, this would not be an ordinary evening. The first signs of trouble began when Marcus returned to Lillian's table to take her order. She was already annoyed, flipping through the menu as if it were a nuisance. "Finally, took you long enough," she said, snapping the menu shut and handing it to him without looking up. "I apologize for the delay, ma'am. What can I get for you this evening?" Marcus replied, his tone steady. "I'll have the filet mignon, medium rare. And make sure it's cooked properly this time," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The last time I was here, it was practically raw. Do you even train your chefs?" Marcus nodded politely. "Of course, ma'am. I'll make sure it's perfect." As he walked away, Lillian leaned over to her companion, loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Honestly, I don't know why they hire people like him. Standards really have dropped, haven't they?" The words hit Marcus like a slap, but he kept his focus. He had heard worse, but tonight, something about her tone, the smugness, the entitlement struck a nerve. Back in the kitchen, Marcus handed off the order to the chef and took a moment to steady himself. He knew he couldn't let her words get to him, but the weight of constant judgment felt heavier tonight. Meanwhile, James Wallace had been quietly observing the interaction. He saw the tension in Marcus's shoulders and the disdain in Lillian's demeanor. This wasn't just a difficult customer. This was someone who believed her privilege gave her the right to demean others. When Marcus returned to Lillian's table with her meal, she wasted no time finding fault. "Is this what you call medium rare?" she asked, prodding the steak with her fork. "It's overcooked. Honestly, I don't even know why I bother coming here." "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. Let me fix this for you," Marcus said, reaching for the plate. "Oh, forget it," she snapped, waving him off. "Just bring me another glass of wine. If you can manage that without messing it up." The other diners had begun to notice the exchange, some casting sympathetic glances toward Marcus, others whispering among themselves. James decided it was time to step in. He approached the table with a calm but firm demeanor, his presence commanding attention. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice even. "No, everything is not all right," Lillian said, turning to him with a huff. "Your waiter doesn't seem to know how to do his job." James glanced at Marcus, who stood silently, his hands clasped in front of him. Then he looked back at Lillian, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am," James said, "I think we need to have a conversation about respect." The air in the restaurant grew heavy as James stood at Lillian's table, his calm demeanor masking the quiet storm beneath. Nearby patrons paused their conversations, their attention drawn to the subtle tension brewing. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what was about to unfold, but grateful for James's intervention. "Respect?" Lillian said with a condescending laugh, setting her wine glass down with a clink. "I've been coming here for years. If anyone deserves respect, it's me. Maybe you should teach your staff how to handle paying customers properly." James raised an eyebrow, his expression unwavering. "Ma'am, every customer here is important, but so are my employees. Marcus has been with us for 3 years, and I can tell you he is one of the finest people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. I won't stand by and let anyone demean him or any member of my team." Lillian's face reddened as murmurs rippled through the restaurant. "Are you accusing me of something?" she asked, her voice rising. James didn't flinch. "I'm asking you to reflect on how you've been speaking to Marcus. Criticism is one thing, but the language and tone you've used go beyond that." Marcus felt a mix of emotions, gratitude for James's support, but also a deep discomfort at being the center of attention. He glanced around the room, noticing how the other diners were watching with a mix of curiosity and unease. Some gave him encouraging nods, while others simply observed in silence. Lillian, however, was far from contrite. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, pushing her chair back. "If you think I'm going to sit here and be lectured like a child." James held up a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but let me share something with you." He gestured toward Marcus. "Do you know who this man is?" Marcus isn't just a waiter. He's a talented chef in training. He works long hours here, then spends his nights taking classes to pursue his dream of opening his own restaurant. He treats every customer with respect, no matter how they treat him in return. James's voice softened as he continued, addressing the entire room now. "People like Marcus represent the best of us, the ones who work hard, stay kind, and rise above the challenges life throws their way. And I won't allow anyone to take that away from him." The room fell silent, the weight of James's words sinking in. Lillian looked around, realizing that the tide had turned against her. The other diners weren't on her side. If anything, their expressions ranged from disapproval to quiet satisfaction at seeing her confronted. For a moment, Lillian seemed at a loss for words. Then, as if regaining her composure, she stood abruptly. "This is outrageous. I'll be taking my business elsewhere," she declared, grabbing her bag. James stepped aside, his expression neutral. "That's your choice, ma'am, but I hope you'll think about what's happened here tonight." As Lillian stormed out of the restaurant, a smattering of applause broke out among the diners. Marcus stood frozen, unsure how to process what had just happened. One of the nearby patrons, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, called out, "Marcus, you handled yourself with such grace. Don't let people like that get to you." Others chimed in with similar sentiments, and Marcus felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of validation and support he hadn't expected. James placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Marcus nodded, though his voice was unsteady when he replied, "I think so." "Thank you, Mr. Wallace." James smiled. "You don't need to thank me. You've earned everyone's respect here tonight, Marcus. Never forget that." The rest of the evening continued smoothly, with patrons going out of their way to express kindness to Marcus and the rest of the staff. But for Marcus, the moment was a turning point, a reminder that while prejudice and ignorance still existed, so did allies and moments of justice. As the door swung shut behind Lillian, a wave of quiet energy washed over the restaurant. The applause from a few diners had subsided, replaced by an almost reverent silence as people returned to their meals. Yet, the weight of what had just transpired lingered in the air, like an unspoken truth. Marcus stood by the counter, his hands gripping the edge tightly as he processed the moment. For years, he had swallowed countless slights, dismissive remarks, and outright insults, choosing to rise above them for the sake of professionalism and his own peace. But tonight, something had shifted. James's public defense felt like an affirmation of everything Marcus had worked so hard to uphold: his dignity, his values, and his worth. James walked up to him, a quiet smile on his face. "Marcus, can we talk for a moment?" Marcus nodded, following James into a quieter corner of the restaurant. James pulled out a chair and gestured for Marcus to sit. "Look," James began, leaning forward, "I didn't want to make a scene back there, but I felt it was necessary. What Lillian said, how she treated you, was unacceptable, and I couldn't stand by and let her think it was okay." Marcus exhaled deeply, his voice soft but steady. "I appreciate that, Mr. Wallace. I really do. But part of me wonders if I should have spoken up for myself instead of staying quiet. Maybe I've been too used to ignoring it." James nodded thoughtfully. "I get that, but sometimes silence is strength, Marcus. You maintained your professionalism and composure in the face of someone trying to tear you down. That's not weakness, that's grace. And trust me, everyone in this room saw it." Marcus looked down at his hands, his mind racing with thoughts. "It just gets exhausting, you know? Always having to prove myself. Always feeling like I have to be twice as good just to be seen as enough." James placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I can't pretend to fully understand what you go through, Marcus. But I want you to know that you don't have to face it alone. You have a team here that respects and admires you. And tonight, you showed everyone exactly why you're one of the best." Before Marcus could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. "Excuse me," said a woman, her tone hesitant but warm. They turned to see the kind-eyed diner who had spoken earlier. She held out her hand to Marcus. "I just wanted to say thank you. Watching how you handled yourself tonight was inspiring. You're a true professional, and I hope you know how much that means to people like me who notice." Marcus shook her hand, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you. That really means a lot." The woman smiled, then added, "And Mr. Wallace, you run a wonderful restaurant. It's not just the food, it's the people. Tonight proved that." As she walked away, James turned back to Marcus. "See what I mean? You're not just a waiter, Marcus. You're a role model. And don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." The night wore on, and as the restaurant emptied out, Marcus found himself reflecting on the day. He thought about his late mother, who had always taught him to treat others with kindness, no matter the circumstances. He thought about the sacrifices she had made to raise him and the values she had instilled in him. For the first time in a long time, Marcus allowed himself to feel proud, not just of how he had handled the situation, but of the person he had become. As the last guest trickled out of the restaurant, leaving behind glowing remarks and generous tips, Marcus began cleaning up the tables, his movements slower and more reflective than usual. The restaurant's hum had quieted, and the dim lighting now felt soothing rather than bustling. The events of the evening played over in his mind, not as a source of frustration, but as a moment of clarity. James approached him, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Take a break, Marcus," he said, gesturing toward a small table near the kitchen. Marcus smiled, setting down his cleaning supplies. He took the seat James had pulled out for him and wrapped his hands around the warm mug. James took a sip of his coffee and leaned back in his chair. "You know," he began, "I've been in this business a long time. I've seen all kinds of people walk through those doors. And I can tell you this, tonight wasn't just about standing up to someone like Lillian. It was about showing people what this place stands for: respect, kindness, and fairness. Marcus nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the steam rising from his coffee. It felt like a turning point, he admitted. Not just for me, but for how I see myself. I've always thought the best way to handle people like her was to stay quiet, stay professional. But tonight, seeing you step in, it reminded me that silence doesn't always have to mean acceptance. Sometimes, it means you're strong enough to let others see the truth for themselves. James smiled. Exactly. And don't forget, Marcus, you've got a voice. You don't need to shout to be heard. The way you carry yourself, the way you treat people, that's louder than anything. The two sat in comfortable silence for a moment before James spoke again. You mentioned once that you want to open your own restaurant someday. I think tonight showed you've got everything it takes to do that. You've got the skills, the heart, and most importantly, the resilience. Marcus chuckled softly, his eyes lighting up. It's been a dream for so long, but I've always felt like it's out of reach. Like maybe it's too big for someone like me. James leaned forward, his tone firm but encouraging. Dreams always feel too big until you take the first step. And let me tell you something. When you're ready to take that step, you won't be doing it alone. I'll back you, Marcus. You've earned it. Marcus looked at James, a lump forming in his throat. Thank you. That means more than I can say. As the night wore on, the staff finished their closing duties, and Marcus found himself standing outside the restaurant under the soft glow of the streetlights. The city hummed around him, a reminder of its constant movement and change. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages of encouragement from coworkers and a few patrons who had left reviews about the evening. One message, in particular, stood out. You handled yourself with grace and strength tonight. Don't ever let anyone dim your light. The world needs more people like you. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a sense of clarity and purpose. The evening had started with pain and humiliation, but ended with hope and affirmation. As he walked home, his mind buzzed with ideas for the future. Menus, layouts, the kind of atmosphere he wanted to create in his own restaurant someday. But most of all, he thought about the kind of leader he wanted to be, one who would stand by his people, just as James had stood by him. The streetlights stretched his shadow long on the pavement, a reminder of the path ahead. And for the first time, Marcus didn't feel daunted by the journey. He felt ready. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales of resilience and kindness. Let's spread the message of respect and compassion. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you have the power to create change one small act at a time.